This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Joviet. Tonight it's Ask Us Anything night, so call in your questions on everything from car accidents to medical mistakes, divorce, child custody questions. The 31 Law Call number 256-536-0077. You can call in and be live on the air, or you can text us to that same number, and we've got some of your texts coming in. We'll pull some of those out. You can also email a legal question. You can send a question on any legal topic any day of the week. You send it to LawCall@WAAYTV.com, and when we get to a show that's on point, we pull some out. We've got some of your email questions pulled out to get us started tonight. Getting us started tonight. William Meservy's here from Timberlake Legal, and Brooks, good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So you guys do personal injury cases just for people to be calling in. That's car accidents. What else does that involve? Personal injury.
Any type of injury, right? Okay. So it could be an on-the-job injury. It could be a loved one in a nursing home who, got a bed sore. It could be a medical malpractice type question. It could be a premises liability, what we sometimes refer to as a slip and fall.
Okay.
And so any type of injury we can talk about, we can discuss, and see if there's any sort of liability or lack thereof and why.
We like to get you started with some video. Tonight's You Make the Law Call video. We pulled this off. So this is a series of different kinds of accidents. Every one of them, though, is somebody that is drifting or pulling out, just spinning out, acting recklessly. So this first one, you'll see what happens to him. If something like this happens, if you're playing around and you cause an accident because you're doing this, or you're the victim on the other end, and okay, dumb little mistakes by folks that are just goofing off. If you're the bystander and you're the innocent bystander and you get hurt, let's talk about how that figures into things. So if you're the driver and you damage your car, are you going to be able to get your own insurance to pay for something like this? There he goes.
In all likelihood, no. Right? And so if you're doing something intentionally,
okay, it's
not an accident. Street racing, if you're violating the law in such a way and acting in such a wanton disregard of the law, your insurance isn't going to cover that, both for yourself or for any, like you said, innocent bystanders that may be injured, right? And so there's sort of 2 points there. One, for the driver acting in the bad behavior, they're going to create a lot of liability for themselves with not a good way to pay if insurance isn't going to step in. And then secondly, it sort of, brings up the point of why uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage is so important for everybody else. And sometimes, that's a policy that's going to be covered under full coverage.
Okay.
One of those things, those terms we hear sometimes. But full coverage is just, it means, you've got these series of policies. Liability is the only policy required by law. It protects you against, if you're at fault for an accident, someone can't sue you and just get your house out from under you. So liability is required by law, and a lot of times people say, well, that's, I'm just going to pay for that. I'm not going to get the full coverage and get those other policies.
Save money. I'm going to save money.
And you do. You save money every month until you're in an accident.
Until you've got trouble and you need it.
And then you're not covered, right? And so, for the innocent bystander, if they had full coverage, even if they're on the sidewalk, just walking down the road and not even in their car,
okay,
that uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage is going to protect them because, the liability carrier, the insurance company for the person goofing off, they're not going to pay that claim.
And whether they've got the cash themselves to pay it. If you're acting like that, I'm betting you don't have a nice big savings account either.
That has been my experience.
We've got callers waiting. We've got Billy on the line with a question from Huntsville. Hi, Billy. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight? Hey, Billy. There you are. What's your question tonight?
I had a question. My daughter's husband passed away a couple of years ago, and I think he didn't have a will. I think if she's paying her payments now, she's his wife, so does she get the house when it's paid off? It's like $36,000 paid off. It's a $200,000 home or $250,000 home. So does she get to change the name of the deed to her name if she's a surviving wife?
Good question. She's going to be paying a long time. Does that mean she owns it?
Well, and so, look, anytime someone dies without a will, the law follows what are called the rules of intestate succession, okay? And that's a fancy legal term of art, which simply, determines how people inherit, okay? And so in that particular instance, that home's going to be marital property. So if they're married, the issue she's going to have, the big issue, is if her name's not on the deed.
Yeah.
And if the house was deeded solely in the husband's name, then, that's going to require, in all likelihood, opening at least a small estate and going through that process and having, ownership transferred over to the wife on the deed. Now, if her name was on the deed and his name was on the deed, removing his name off the deed is a simpler task.
Because most people that are married, they own a house with rights of survivorship, right? So how would that make a difference?
Well, you can own property a couple different ways, right? And you can leave property in a couple different ways. And so, the right of survivorship simply means that, the survivor is going to be able to own that house, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you see or hear of people giving life estates, right? Or this, if you wanted to leave your house to your son, but then have it revert back to the estate afterwards or something like that, you could do that. So there's several different ways it can happen if you plan ahead, right? And you have all that laid out in a will or a trust or some other way. But if you die without a will, the law is going to revert back to this specific set of rules of what happens, what goes where. And that's typically going to be the wife and then the children, and if there are no children, no wife, the parents, and so on and so forth.
We've got Sheila on the line with a question from Stevenson. Hi, Sheila. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
My question is, my husband died last year.
I'm sorry.
He left his son, which was a stepson, as the executor over his estate. Is his son responsible for his burial? I've already paid the funeral bill, and I just wonder if his son was responsible for that since he was the executor.
Well, he would be if the will said he was,
Okay.
right? But not typically. So the executor or the personal representative of the estate has one very important task, and that task is to fulfill the wishes of the deceased as expressed in the will. And generally speaking, they have to be bonded unless the will waives that requirement. But, they have to be bonded in case they mess up in their duties as administering that everything goes as it's supposed to according to the will. But typically, funeral burial costs aren't going to be part and parcel to a will or how the will says, things have to go upon the death of the decedent. It's mostly just going to outline property, bank accounts, inheritances, things along those lines. Typically, funerals and burial costs and things of that nature are going to be covered in a pre-need agreement with the funeral home.
Now, she could go to the probate court, right? If his will is being probated, she could go get a copy of that. She can look at it, and she could see whether maybe there's language in there about the funeral expenses. So, Sheila, that might be a way to go look at it and just check.
Absolutely.
And we're sorry for your loss, both she and Billy tonight, the families with losses. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We've got some text questions coming in, like somebody with a bad reaction to a flu shot. We'll see what the response is for that. So stick around. The 31 law call number 536-0077.
You're watching WAAY 31 Law Call. Your rights, your calls, live. Presented by the Tennessee Valley's award-winning personal injury and wrongful death law firm, Timberlake, League & Brooks. Featuring the knowledge and experience of Attorney Michael Timberlake, Attorney Will League, Attorney Heath Brooks, Attorney William Meservey. And hosted by broadcaster and family law attorney Sharon Doviet. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back to 31 Law Call. Tonight, it's Ask Us Anything night, and we've got callers calling in. We've also got William Meservey here from Timberlake, League & Brooks answering questions. We got a text question in. You can call in. You can also text to that same number. So a viewer says, I took a flu shot in September of 2024 and was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré disease syndrome after this. Is there any compensation for that? I've heard of that before, right?
Yeah.
Have you?
Quite possibly would be the answer. Congress has set up two different compensation funds, both of which are related to immunizations and, vaccines, right? And so if you suffer a complication as a result of a vaccine or inoculation, and I believe the flu shot is covered under that, there's a process you go through. There's a web page you go to.
Interesting.
You generally, it's usually pretty straightforward what you need to do once you find that web page. But you can go in there and search for that, and then once you find it, follow the steps, submit your claim, and as long as there's medical evidence supporting that, the complication that you had is related to the vaccine or flu preventative in this case.
Good.
You should be able to recover it.
Good luck with that. We've got Imogene from Athens. Hi, Imogene. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight? Hi, Imogene from Athens. How are you doing? Did we lose you? One more try. Imogene from Athens. Okay, how about Gail from Decatur? Gail, thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Go
My
ahead.
question is that I was parked at a store, and I was not inside of my vehicle.
Okay. Good. Just listen through your phone. You're going to get a delay if you try and listen over the TV. So just listen through your phone and turn your TV down.
Somebody ran a shopping cart into the back of my car, and I called the insurance, and I wanted to know, why did they not rule that as comprehensive? They ruled it as collision.
Okay.
Yeah, so, a lot of it has to do with how it happens, okay? And, whether or not there's anyone to pursue to recover against. And so my question would be, in that particular instance, is did they, stop and find the lady who pushed the cart? Or was it just one of those situations where, hey, someone didn't put their cart up in the cart return,
And the wind caught
gets
it?
to blowing, or does the slow downhill roll and hits into the car? And did anyone witness it to be able to say definitively which of the two happened? Parking lots are notoriously difficult for lawyers and insurance companies. And part of the reason for that is it's private property. And so, a lot of times, even if you call the police, they don't have to come do an accident report if it's private property.
Oh, so they won't even help you.
And depending on the jurisdiction you're in, sometimes they won't. Now, Huntsville police will usually come do a report for you. So then you're going to the insurance company. You have no report. You have no whodunit. Right? And they're trying to sort out, well, how's this going to work? And so usually what ends up happening is, a situation like that, you're going to end up paying your deductible. They're still going to cover it, but you're going to, be out the $500 deductible or whatever your deductible happens to be. And that's sort of one of the ways we see insurance companies saving folks money these days is, they'll give you a lower monthly premium, but your deductible's now $1,000 instead of $500 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it's an unfortunate thing that happened, but I can understand how the insurance company could classify that, just from lack of information or details.
Good luck with it, Gail. We got this email question from Felicia. Felicia says, if you're in a wreck and the other driver asks to just settle the damage with cash instead of getting the insurance companies involved, is that generally an okay idea or a bad idea, and why? Do you absolutely have to tell your insurance company about something, or can you just handle it?
You could absolutely just handle it. Now, from my experience, because I've gotten lots of calls from people who started out with such good intentions, it typically does not end well, right? Because someone, say, just bumps you at a stop sign, and there's some damage to your bumper, and they say, look, don't call the insurance companies, let's just settle this like adults, send me the bill. Well, then they get a bill from a body shop for $3,500 for a scratch on a bumper, and all of a sudden they're like, whoa, so I don't have $3,500 to throw at this right now. Maybe we can set something up, and maybe they make a couple payments, and then things happen, life happens, right? And then it doesn't happen, and then you're trying to get the insurance company involved. After,
6 months later.
Yeah, okay. After deals have been done and some money's been exchanged, but not all, and it can be difficult to undo. But in theory, yes, it's quite possible just to simply settle your damages, because all insurance is doing is just covering your mistake, right? It's saying, okay, look, you pay a monthly premium. If you ever make a mistake, rear end someone at a stop sign, whatever it is, then we'll come in and take care of that damage up to your policy limit, right?
Okay.
A lot of the bare minimum auto insurance policies only have $25,000 in property damage coverage. Well, as you can imagine, 80% of vehicles on the roadway anymore cost more than $25,000, and so sometimes there's not even enough auto insurance money there to cover the damage. But it can be a sticky situation.
Okay. We've got Jill on the line with a question from Boaz. Hi, Jill. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Hello. Good evening.
Good
Thank
evening.
you for taking my call.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. My question is the 1% law in the state of Alabama. If you're considered 1% at fault in a car accident on November 9th, 2024, I had just veered out into Highway 431 in Gunnersville, and I was estimated doing 3 to 4 miles an hour. I was just trying to merge out to the right-hand lane. The driver was passing. I didn't see either one of them. They were further back, and it looked crystal clear to myself and to my mother that there was no oncoming traffic. So merged out, and he was passing the 18-wheeler. The 18-wheeler made a right-hand turn prior, and the bed of the truck had not completely got to the turn, but the headlights you could not see. And he admitted that he was passing an 18-wheeler, and he didn't see me, and that there was no way the driver could have seen him. The police didn't show up for an hour and 45 minutes. I was rushed to Huntsville Hospital. My mom was injured. I was severely injured. I was down for 6 months. And I was told by my insurance company they would only give me $1,000. I had $25 to $50 per person per accident due to 1% Alabama law that he had the right-of-way only.
Gotcha.
But there's no witnesses that he had his headlights on or the speed he was going.
Okay.
And I was
1%
just
at
wondering
fault.
from the nice attorney here, if he thought I had a chance of getting more for my medical and pain and suffering, which I did have a lot of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, the first thing I would tell you is insurance companies are going to always make their own internal investigations, their own internal determinations as to what they think you might be entitled to or what their risks are if it pushed any further. And a lot of times, particularly if you do have serious injuries, you want to get a lawyer, or at least talk to a lawyer, and get an objective opinion of, what their thoughts are regarding the liability of how the event occurred. But you're not wrong in that Alabama is one of 4 states left in the Union that is what's called a contributory negligent state. It is an archaic law. It is old. And many would say outdated, okay? But what it says is if you are at all responsible for the collision, if you contribute in any form or fashion to the cause of the collision, you are barred from recovery.
Okay.
All right? Now, there are instances where both parties share some fault. And in those instances, both parties are barred from recovery against each other.
Okay.
All right? So if you think about that, what it means is an insurance company does not have to prove that the accident was your fault.
Okay.
They just have to prove it was 1% your fault, and really 0.1% your fault, right? And it's, not a very fair or equitable law. And so most states have moved to what's called the modern approach or comparative negligence. So if that same wreck happened in Tennessee and you were determined to be 1% at fault, you could still recover 99% of the damages from the other party. If you were 10% at fault, you could recover 90%.
Gotcha.
85% or 15% at fault, you could recover 85%.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a more fair and equitable approach, whereas in Alabama, we have this very sort of, razor edge law, and it could be difficult to overcome. But certainly with the type of injuries that you're talking about and the, sort of complex facts of how the accident occurred, I would certainly talk to a lawyer and, see if there's anything that could be done.
Go sit down with somebody, talk it through.
Absolutely.
Okay, got a text question. We had so much storm damage recently. Somebody says, I have roof damage on my house and the insurance company won't pay for a complete roof replacement. When I go to the contractor to ask them to just repair the roof, they say it's not repairable. It needs a total replacement, and she's had a couple of contractors tell her that. How do I get the insurance company to pay for the complete replacement?
Well, you may have to retain a lawyer too. And unfortunately, it's a trend we're hearing a lot about lately. But it's sort of an age-old dispute. Insurance company says, no, this doesn't need to be a full replacement. This just needs, a couple shingles replaced. And you get the actual contractor on the roof, and he says, look, there's no way I can pull up those couple shingles to replace them without damaging all these other shingles.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be responsible for that, right? And so you can end up in this sort of situation where you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And unfortunately, sometimes it does take a lawyer to break the log jam and enforce the contract of insurance that you have.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back answering more questions. It's Ask Us Anything night. Stay with us. If you didn't get your questions answered tonight, here's how to get in touch with William Meservey with Timberlake, League & Brooks in Huntsville, 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com. And if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way.
And Sharon Doviet for all things family law related. She is here in Huntsville, 256-539-7337, and you can learn more about her at www.sharonfamilylaw.com.
We got an email question from Alex. He says, I reported a work injury last week, and I received a separation notice in the mail today. Is that legal? Does that mean I won't get workers' comp?
Well, that's two questions, Alex. To the first question, the answer is maybe. If you violated a safety rule or some other offense for which you can be terminated, then it could be a valid termination. If you were terminated simply for being injured on the job, then no, they cannot fire you for that reason, and you could have a retaliatory discharge claim. Under either scenario, you're entitled to workers' compensation and all the benefits that would come with it, to include medical treatment and, if you had a permanent injury, some sum of money at the end.
Thanks for all your questions. Thanks, and we'll see you next week. Have a safe week.
Bill Penny Toyota's entire inventory is on sale now. Plus,